Hello there. Today we are going to discuss Misery by Stephen King. I, um, Before we start, I should probably go over what the plot is. I think we all kind of know the plot because the movie's rather famous, but in case anybody doesn't know, I'll give it a bare bones explanation. Paul Sheldon is an author. He's in an accident in Colorado. Annie Wilkes is a former nurse who finds him, drags him out of the car, takes him back to her house, and nurses him back to health. Unfortunately, Annie Wilkes is both Paul Sheldon's number one fan of his series of books following the character of Misery, as well as a complete psychotic, insane person. She tortures him. She forces him to write another misery book for her, and hilarity ensues. Let's just put it that way. We'll say this: if anybody thinks that they know this book from watching the movie, no, you don't. The book is much more hard edged than the movie was. The movie actually softened it quite a bit. Um, but I really want to dig into like what this book is about on a deeper level, because well, like any other Stephen King book, the deeper levels are kind of right there on the surface, so they're kind of easy to dig into. And I can think of a few things, but I just want to cover like the top five ish deeper themes in the book that I kind of want to get into. I don't know if I call them themes or not, but they're just things I noticed about the book, and I just want to go over them. So let's start with the first one, the concept of parasocial relationships. Um, Obviously, Annie Wilkes is in a parasocial relationship with Paul Sheldon. She thinks she knows him from reading his books, and she really doesn't, because nobody is who they really are when they're creating something. I'm not even who I really am when I'm making this video. I mean, let's put it this way. I don't try and put on a character when I make these videos, but at the same time, I don't know if it's like this for if it's different for like the younger generations or not. But anyway, anybody in my generation, as soon as you point a camera at us, we are not ourselves. We are, a different version of ourselves, you know. And so, I mean, just keep that in mind anytime you watch your YouTube, or anytime you read a book. You aren't seeing the real person that these people are, and that's the problem with Annie Wilkes. She's I won't say fallen in love with Paul Sheldon, but she sees Paul as a way to get what she wants because she thinks that he wants to write another misery book, and honestly, he really doesn't. Um, but yeah, I mean, just keep that in mind because honestly, parasocial relationships are not healthy, and there's a reason why there's a division between the creator and the consumer of that creation. The second thing I can think of is Stockholm syndrome, because at some point Paul starts to kind of try to understand Annie. He even starts to think using her terminology, her ways of speaking. And I mean, that's a problem. And honestly, the book does it to the reader as well, because at one point in the book, you're kind of sitting there saying, gosh, the rest of the world is kind of being mean to Annie. Annie's a mass murderer. She's torturing Paul Sheldon. She's literally cutting parts of him off. Um, she's not a good person. But towards the end of the book, you spent so much time with Annie that you start to almost want to see things from her perspective. And I think that's kind of a really clever thing that Stephen King did. Because a, a lot of the time, I believe we've been mishandled by so many people that we start to try to say, well, maybe these other people have a point. Maybe we deserve to be handled this way. And we don't. They don't have a right to do that. Never allow yourself to get into the position of second guessing your own values and morals or your own situation, because it's that's how bad people win. Because the third thing I really want to discuss is the exercise of control that Annie has by sort of chaotic personality. Sometimes she's nice and love bombsing. Sometimes she's truly evil and cuts his foot off or cuts his thumb off. Sometimes she just ignores him. Sometimes she just leaves the house for days at a time and lets him starve. This is a form of control that she's enforcing on Paul during the entire book. That's another thing that we can kind of apply to real life. I mean, when people start doing this to us, we have to realize that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to enforce control on us. And I really don't want to get too deeply into that, because that has other things, but just keep that in mind in the current 21st century world. Fourth thing, this book really deeply dives into Annie's personality disorder. She obviously is a psychotic person. She has blackout periods. She has times when she'll, like I said, love bomb Paul. She'll bring him ice cream. She'll be very nice. She'll give him drugs. She'll do anything for him. And then there are other times when she can't help herself and is mean to him. This is kind of related to the last one, where she's exercising that control. But I think it's distinct in a way that, whenever you see a person doing stuff like this, it's not a healthy person that's doing it. It's just, and I just want to put that out there. It's really not healthy to be in a relationship like that. Certainly not healthy for Paul, but I mean, we're talking about fiction here. But in real life, it's also not healthy when you see those type of behaviors where you'd never know which version of a person you're going to get, that you have to kind of remove yourself from that relationship. And the fifth one is kind of a deeper one. This book is almost like a discussion about how the creative process works for writing. Paul describes it as people down in the boiler room bringing ideas to his conscious mind, and another times describes, as he's writing, like a hole opens up in the paper and he can just see the plot and just transcribes it. It's kind of and not only that, but also he works in stuff that is going on in his real life into the book that he's writing for Annie. I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, because I really didn't expect to see Stephen King, because I have a feeling this is somewhat autobiographical about his writing process, and I did not expect to see that level of mastery in explaining how he writes his books worked into the process of this. And so I really enjoyed that part of it. I will admit, I skipped over some of the excerpts from the book that he's writing, because the Misery series is a series of romantic adventures, and I really wasn't that interested in it. But at the same time, I don't think any reader is supposed to be that interested in it, because they're not very deep books to read, apparently. But also the other like linkage to this about how the writing process goes. One thing I found really fascinating was, at one point, Paul is thinking to himself about how was he lying to himself when he wrote his so-called real books as opposed to the Misery books. Was he just a hack writer that didn't have the talent that he thought, but just had the good luck to luck upon a good series that sold well? I have to wonder if perhaps Stephen King thought along those lines sometimes himself, because he's tried other things over the course of his career, and always he's always going to be that horror author, but he's tried crime novels, he's tried science fiction novels, and I wonder sometimes he's questioned whether he himself could actually break away from horror in the same way that Paul questions whether he can break away from these romantic fantasies of misery. So I mean, it's just it was. I have to wonder if maybe there was a little bit of introspection going on while King wrote this novel. So, all that said, is this book worth reading? By goodness, yes. It's not his longest novel. It's not his shortest novel, but it's well worth reading. There are some parts of it that are difficult to get through. There are some parts of it where where basically I said, I have got to put this book aside for a couple minutes after reading this chapter, because it does get very, very intense at some parts. But then the last 75 pages, I couldn't put it down. I would suggest reading it with an eye towards thinking about what Stephen King is saying in the novel. It's like I said many, many reviews ago, nobody writes a multiple 100-page novel and doesn't have anything else on their mind. Stephen King does tend to have more things on his mind. But yeah, I mean, I would give this a 2 thumbs up, or in the case of Paul, 1 thumb up and 1 stub up. You'll know if you've read the book. I would this is a completely unadulterated recommend for reading this book. I loved it. Go ahead and read it. You'll love it, I think. But keep in mind that it's a lot more hard-edged than anything you've seen in the movie. That's all I'll say. Anyway, that's it for today. Stay positive. Have a great day. Bye-bye.